So now I'm recording, I think. I don't know. I've never
Yep.
recorded.
Yeah, you're recording.
All right. So let me share my screen. Um, so can you guys see my screen now?
Mhm.
Can you guys see
So
it?
you,
Yep.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got dark mode going.
Yeah. Right. So here's Rev Robotics, which is where you're going to get most of your parts. So if we go look at, let's look at a random part, a color sensor. So this has, you see this part, and then you go down, you scroll down, and then, actually, wait. Sorry, here is the part number. And so I sent out this GrabCAD folder thing, which has all the parts from Rev Robotics. So you can look up the part file, the part number, like this. Oh, and I guess they don't have a CAD file for color sensor. Well, bad example.
You picked a bad one to start with.
I definitely did. Well, let's look at a different one. Basically, you follow that that you just copy paste and search for whatever part you're looking for, and then you'll find the CAD file. Also, doesn't have one. Am I on the right thing? I can't tell.
Are you sure that one doesn't have one down below to download?
Maybe it does. Here, okay. So some of them, I guess, have it not in this. Some of them actually have it in the description of the part. So you can go down here. And so if there's nothing down here, you can look up in this folder and see if they have that. But it should be down here. I don't know what, for some of the parts that I looked at earlier, it wasn't down there. Maybe it's certain parts are in this folder, but I'm not sure. Regardless, you should look in both locations if you can't see anything. So you click here and you download the step file, and then you'll see that it's downloaded here. So you go into OnShape, and then you can create a new thing. And instead of making a document, you can import a file. So I can import this download now. And I still haven't found the best way to do it, but I think right now what I've found is the best way to do it is probably to import into a single document, because that makes it that allows it to like maintain the mates and all the parts, because all the parts are just in the part studio, but then in the assembly it looks all in the correct order. Like I'll give an example here. So you can see this is the file I just downloaded, but this is one that I downloaded before. And I downloaded, oh, this was, never mind. This is an experiment that I did to see the best way to download it. So you can actually download it like either way, but I personally like downloading it where you have a part studio and an assembly, because for smaller parts, you can then like name the parts within the part studio. So with this example, it doesn't actually, sorry, I don't know what's going on with this, but basically with this example, there are individual parts that you're not going to necessarily name. You're just going to have them all under this one name, but it'll show up as a lot of parts regardless. It doesn't really make that big of a difference as far as I can tell if you import it into a single document with a part studio and assembly, or if you just import it into just an assembly. The big difference is when you're importing, there's a third option, which is it's into multiple documents. And so that I believe will just split up an assembly, and then you'll have a different part for each component. So like if something has multiple parts, each of those parts will be in its own part studio, I believe, or considered its own part. And that I wouldn't suggest using just because it's kind of more difficult to use. So what I do after I imported the part, usually it takes a second. Sometimes you'll be stuck on this screen, and then you just click home and like wait for it to load, and you'll see the part. But what I like to do, especially when there's when there's multiple parts, Like with this part, it's fine. You can now use this. So let me go into an assembly. So what you can do to insert the parts that you've downloaded is instead of looking at current document when you're inserting things, go to other document, and then you can look at my OnShape, and you'll see all of your documents, but you'll also see the ones you've downloaded. So here are the things that I've downloaded. So I can import this, and then I can either import the studio or the assembly. In this case, it doesn't really make much difference because it's one part, but for this, the part studio is a bit harder to work with because it'll treat everything as an individual part. And so, never mind, not this. So here, I'm not totally sure what's going on, but usually you'll see everything like in an assembly, and I think that's the best way to do it. So if I go to the other thing that I opened earlier, I believe it was this one. Right, so here's the assembly. For some reason, I don't, oh, sorry, no, this is the part studio. This is the wrong one then. Here. So here is my assembly, and I think I imported the other part studio to get this because I was experimenting with like the best way to import files. So here what I've actually done is I highlighted all the parts, and because there's so many individual parts, the best way to deal with it as one unit and make it into one part essentially is to use grouping. So I highlighted all of the parts and I grouped it, and then that way it basically locks it into these positions where, like, even though there are no actual mates within OnShape that are holding it into these positions, it'll lock it like this. And so you can, if I go back to my other document that I just created, I can now insert this. I can insert this assembly as I don't know exactly why that happened, but I can insert this assembly, and then it'll like keep everything in the same location. So now there's like I can't drag away individual parts. I would have been able to before. I'll demonstrate that by importing the part studio rather than the assembly. So this is the part studio. If I insert this, you can see I can drag away each like individual part, and that's not what you want to do. You want to have it as one part that you can use. So that's the basic overview. Like that's the most annoying part is dealing with things that are broken into multiple parts like this. With the other thing that I just downloaded, the bracket, it's because it's just one part, it's really simple to use, and you don't have to worry about like having to group it or anything or have it in different parts because it's simply just this one part. But for assemblies, make sure you have it in an assembly first and have everything mated together in the group before you put it into your final assembly. And another tip is like don't import things into the assemblies that you're working in. So like you see here, I made a new document to into the documents that you're working in. So you see here, I made a new document rather than like importing something into a document and then using that document. Because if you import something into a document, it creates a new tab for it, and so you'll end up having a lot of tabs, and it'll really slow down your overall assembly because you want to like it's trying to load all these things in the same document, but you want to basically have it reference the other documents. And so that takes me to my next point, which is kind of not really super important right now, but I'm working on making like an FTC common parts folder thing. And so rather than everyone having just random parts like scattered around their OnShape, you can have this all in like one location. And so you don't have to worry with looking up for certain parts on Rev Robotics or Go Builda, I think is what it's called. You can just go to like the electrical section, and then all the electrical things would be here, and then you can insert those. And so that's like the same inserting process as with the um, untitled document. I mean, with a regular document and inserting like an assembly that's from another document. So you just insert and then you go to other document and then you go my OnShape FTC common parts and then you would like find whatever part you want to insert. So yeah, that's the basic overview of importing parts. I think I covered pretty much everything. I know it wasn't super clear, but hopefully you understand it somewhat, and I'll post the recording of this after. But does anyone have any questions about importing parts?
So
All right.
I will throw it out there. In general, when you're looking to download parts, it looked like everything on Rev was already in STEP and there wasn't another option, so that's fine. There are other file formats that you might come across. If at all possible, try to keep to using STEP files. They tend to import the best. The other common one you'll see is IGES, IGES, or IGS, depending on how they're writing it. Those ones tend to have a lot more issues importing, because really what it's doing is it's trying to take a common language and translate it into a model here, and some of those surfaces get screwed up, and STEP seems to be the most friendly to use. So if you're downloading hardware from, say, like McMaster, I don't know how much FTC goes on to McMaster for parts, but a lot of their stuff is available to download, and they have quite a few different file formats you can choose, but the STEP is still the best option for like screw nuts and bolts and those sorts of things.